very good afternoon and welcome to this post-budget debate brought to you by Pelham Uganda. Pelham Uganda is the Participatory Ecological Land Use Management Uganda. Pelham Uganda are focusing specifically on agriculture and issues to do with allocation of resources to the agriculture sector. We know it still employs a majority of Ugandans, and the minister told us yesterday in the presentation of the budget that agriculture is responsible for 45% of the economy. Said a substantial portion of the Ugandan economy is run on agriculture. Are the allocations, do they align with what we say employs the bulk of Ugandans? What does that mean? We'll be discussing those in this program brought to you by Pelham Uganda. My name is Charles Mwangusha-Mpagi. I have two teams. One is a panel in studio and a panel out of studio. One member of the panel will be joining us, I think, trying to navigate the traffic. And we're coming to you live from Serena Conference Center in the studios of NTV. Let me introduce with me here, I have the Honorable Amos Lugolobi. Amos Lugolobi is a Member of Parliament for Ntenjeru County North in Kayunga District. He's a member of the ruling National Resistance Movement. Very nice to have you.
Thank you so much. I'm pleased to be here this afternoon.
Thank you. I also have with me Marilyn Kabalere.
Yes.
Is that how it's pronounced?
Yes.
Marilyn Kabalere is a program officer in charge of advocacy at Pelham Uganda. Very nice to have you, Marilyn.
Thank you, Charles, for having us.
Okay. And if there is traffic police or whoever, if you have a lead car, please assist Dr. Fred Muhumuza to navigate his way into studio. We need him to get here as quickly as we can. I'm being joined via Zoom link by Helen Kasuja, Deputy Executive Director, Community Integrated Development Initiatives, CIDI, and Technical Advocacy Advisor for Pelham Uganda. Do I have Helen Kasuja yet? Not yet. Helen should be joining us in a moment. We'll also be joined by the Honorable Francis Gonahasa. Francis Gonahasa is Member of Parliament for Kabweri County in Kibuku District and a member of the Forum for Democratic Change. He is an agriculturalist. Honorable Golobi is an economist. I want to start with Marilyn and ask, you decided to put together this discussion. In normal times, this would have been in a conference hall somewhere in town, but times are not normal, which is an advantage. So we leverage available technology to do it maybe at a reduced cost. Why are you interested in a discussion that narrows down to specifically agriculture in relation to the budget?
Thank you, Charles, for the question. We are specifically focusing on agriculture because that is our focus as Pelham Uganda. And our target is mainly to improve the livelihoods of smallholder farmers, who are the majority in Uganda. And we have always been focusing on the agriculture budget over the years. Like you said, the times have changed. We have to do things differently. We used to have these meetings immediately after the budget reading. We listen into the budget, and we have our constituency also listening, and then they share their views about the budget. But now it's not possible. So we had to have a live show like this one after the budget reading to share what we feel about the budget and where gaps are, so that they can inform
what do you feel
the
about
next
the budget?
budget. I don't think it's a right budget. But I'm confident that revisions will be made according to what the minister said in his last statement.
Wouldn't you have said the same thing after the reading of the budget for 2019-2020 or 2018-2019?
I would have said that.
Yes.
By this time, the situation is totally different because of the COVID-19 and how people have realized the importance of the agriculture sector. It needs to be given priority. We've been advocating for an increment in the agriculture budget. But now this situation where we are in, I think all the things we've been advocating for should be taken into consideration because it is one of the sectors in the real economy the President was talking about. So
That
the
was
time is now to really give emphasis and focus on the agriculture sector.
Have you done a study? Do you know, can you share with us and our viewers, how has COVID-19 affected smallholder farmers, small-scale farmers? The president said these are not, and many people think that this was a problem, or has largely been a problem for people in urban areas. The people in the countryside, who constitute the majority of the smallholder farmers, have been able to access their gardens. That was never under any restrictions. They're producing food. We see there is a lot of supply of foodstuffs in markets around here, regardless of which side you look at it, whether it's farm produce, agricultural products, or livestock or poultry. There's a lot abundant supply at this moment. So someone would think there's no effect. COVID-19 has no effect on smallholder farmers especially.
The effect is there. This lockdown, indeed, I was in the village. So I know the effect is there. First of all, the poor roads, the farmers could not manage to walk long distances to the markets. And remember, the borders could not carry farmers. So how would they go to these places to market their produce? So they were greatly affected. They have the produce, but how would they transport them to the markets? So I think it really affected the farmers. Though they are smallholder farmers, you cannot look for market if you don't have the means to go there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Honorable Lugolobi, you chair the committee on budget. So this basically is your budget. You and your colleagues looked through it, and you received it, I think, in December, January?
Yeah, by December we received the budget framework paper.
Yes.
And in April 1st we received the annual budget estimates. Yes.
And you passed them?
And we passed them.
Yes, so yesterday was a ceremonial. Of course, yeah. Yesterday was a ceremonial presentation by Minister Matia Kasaija at 45.5 trillion Uganda shillings. Can you give me your, I know from where you sit and the introduction we just had of you, is that this is your budget. So there are concerns already emerging out of this budget. What was your own impression of the budget as presented yesterday?
Well, I think we still have to do a little more into this budget because this budget was done, the budget process starts in September. So the process started September last year, 2019. And we had a national budget conference, and then we had the regional conferences, other forms of consultations, which culminated into a budget framework paper to Parliament at the end of December 2019. January, we processed the budget framework paper, got it approved at the end of January, and we sent it back to government with several recommendations. By that time, we don't realize that COVID was going to come. We did not envisage that it would be a serious problem to the extent of a pandemic. So that is a budget that we have. And that was a budget, that was approved by Parliament. But because the budget was approved...
And that is the budget that was presented yesterday?
Indeed. And, we noted this when we were presenting our report as Budget Committee to the House for passing this budget. We actually recommended to the House that government should get back to Parliament with proposals amending the budget we had just passed, because we had not incorporated into that budget the assumptions for COVID-19 pandemic into that budget. So the effects of COVID were not there. So now we need to readjust the budget to become post-COVID compliant. It may not be post-COVID because COVID is still there, but COVID has already had a huge effect on our economy and on our budgets. So we really need to adjust this budget, to deal with the current situation. Because now we are in a situation, kind of a stagnation after a lockdown, and we need to resuscitate everything. And even with agriculture, I think it has been severely affected. because in a lockdown, you affect the demand for the agricultural supplies, both locally and internationally. You know that the airport was locked up, and therefore nobody was exporting anything via that airport. So demand for agricultural produce was actually very minimal, even in the markets in Kampala.
The lockup of the airport affected only passenger planes. Cargo planes are still moving.
Cargo planes
And the numbers the president gave you during the State of the Nation address, he indicated we have actually exported more coffee in terms of volume. We have exported more vanilla in terms of volume. We have exported tea. I need to look at the numbers for tea. The president shared them as well. So the export market, exports have been sustained. You have a dip in March, but then they recover significantly in April.
I think you have not been to the villages. Recently I visited an irrigation scheme. It's a micro-irrigation scheme supported by Ministry of Water and Environment. And we have a number of farmers there producing tomatoes. These producers were stranded because they produced a lot of tomatoes, but the consumption had gone drastically down. For some reason, because people are not working, the demand is not there.
Yes.
And that problem is not only in Uganda, it's there globally. Because of a lockdown, incomes are affected. And it's from incomes that people demand goods and services. So demand for goods and services, the purchasing power was heavily hit. And because it was hit, agriculture cannot survive without demand. You could go to Kasero market, for instance. You wouldn't find many buyers there. The buyers would ordinarily find in markets. You could go to Nakawa. Very few people were entering that market. Why? Because they did not have the money to spend.
So how much legroom? I was listening to the minister. I have looked through the budget, his budget speech. You maintained the theme, sustainable industrialization for inclusive growth, employment, and wealth creation. And I'm wondering, we've been living with COVID for the last almost 3 months, at least in this country, from the time we do the lockdown on March 18th to today. We've known that COVID was ravaging Europe, especially around February. It had arrived in Europe, especially in Italy. But we knew that it had been in Wuhan in China from December through January. Was it beyond you to, as Parliament, to advise government and say, especially as chairman of the budget committee, to say, wait a minute, look, the times we are in are different. The budget doesn't speak to the times. Can you delay by some time, readjust it, so that people like Marilyn here are comforted and see that the government is realigning with the times. We'll go into a lot of these lamentations about what it provides for the agriculture sector and what it doesn't provide. And why I was trying to stretch Marilyn earlier is that this has been a very persistent cry for a very long time. So how does a pandemic budget respond to those very long-standing concerns?
Some of these problems, I think, have been there for a long time. I would agree with you, particularly the problems of financing the agricultural sector, the industrial sector, tourism. I think to summarize it, the productive sectors of this economy have not been fundamentally supported in terms of resources. For instance, whereas we recognize that agriculture is the backbone of our economy and employs the majority of our population, the resources that we allocate to agriculture are so minimal. In fact, out of a budget of 45.5 trillion, it's only about 1.3 trillion that we allocate to agriculture. Of course, the argument put forward by the Ministry of Finance has always been that because when they construct roads, those roads are meant to facilitate agriculture. But as far as I'm concerned, these roads, yes, facilitate the movement of goods, including agricultural produce, but these roads support so many other people. They cut across various sectors. A child going to school uses the same road, so they support education, likewise tourism, likewise so many other things. So we cannot use roads to justify this underfunding in agriculture. You know, when we talk about agriculture, it's a long value chain, starting from, I think, research provided by NARO and its various institutions. NARO, that research is a broad thing. Now you come to, after research, you come to extension of services to the farmers across various local governments. It's a network of officers sitting at various sub-counties across the country. You know, all that is agriculture. But the question is, through this value chain, to what extent are we supporting these various points on the value chain? Research, when at us, it was a donor-supported program, pulled out of research. We have not found resources, you know, to compensate for what was lost in research. So NARO is struggling. Now, when you get to extension, we have been struggling to attract, I mean, to try and impress upon government to recruit extension workers. Because we need them in the sense that the research products coming out of NARO should percolate to the population, you know, and we do that through extension workers. So extension workers are necessary. They are being restored. Now, the third category is the one of post-harvest storage. We have silos in this country. Very serious problem. You know, you hear of the Uganda warehousing receipt system. When you look at the budget of the Uganda warehousing receipt organization, very minimal, you know. And then from warehousing and storage, you have the issue of processing, value addition. It is during this time that we are beginning to seriously talk about providing more resources through UDB and the Microfinance Support Center for agro-processing. You know, did we have to wait for COVID? You know, and then the issue of marketing itself. We always assume that the private sector will find their way into the market. But then why did we create the Uganda Export Promotions Board? That is Uganda Export Promotions Board.
Who do you want to answer that question?
Who
would you rather
No,
have?
it is the government. For me, for us in
Parliament, between me and Marilyn and our viewers, who do you want to answer that question? Because if you're looking for somebody closest to government, you are as close as they get to government.
Well, I will come to the points to these very issues and say what Parliament has done.
Okay. Let me check. Do I have Honorable Gonahasa yet? Not yet. Okay. Meaning that we have to continue the discussion internally here. Let me go back to Marilyn. You're listening to the Member of Parliament who chairs the Budget Committee. The budget was presented yesterday. You, working in civil society, have been raising these very questions for as long as PELAM has existed. Now, I want to throw it to you and say, do you feel there is an understanding of the challenges that the agriculture sector faces at Parliament and at government level? If from Parliament, from government, if you had the minister yesterday, I found a very interesting statement that the minister made yesterday towards the closing of his presentation. And he said, Madam Speaker, substantial progress has been made in primary production. The agriculture sector plays a central role in Uganda's economy. It accounts for 45% of exports and employs 64% of all Ugandans and 72% of all the youth. Thus, its importance to influencing household incomes cannot be under... Now, you look at...
It's a beautiful statement.
Yes. The MP calls it a beautiful statement. Yeah. How do you react to something like that? And listening to what the MP has just said.
I don't even know what to say. Because when you look at the budget speech, you see the rate up is very good. Everyone talks about the agriculture sector, how it is important, how it employs...
In flowery language.
Yeah, in flowery language.
Yes.
But when you go down to the allocations, that's where you find the details and you are like, oh my God, how come there is no money allocated here? But over the years, like you said, Charles, we have been presenting very good recommendations to the Agriculture Committee. And they are adopted. Then the Agriculture Committee takes them to the Budget Committee. Some of them they stay there, but we keep on pushing for the same recommendations. I don't think they change. Like what the Honorable was talking about, extension and water for agricultural production, research, they are usually the same. But you see that the budget, the allocation is very minimal. So this language is there. I know that the members of parliament understand what agriculture is to the economy. We also understand what it is, but I think the political will to really put money in the agriculture sector is lacking.
The political will lies with the members of parliament, doesn't it?
Yeah, the good thing we have...
They represent the political wing of government.
The good thing we have a member of parliament.
Yes.
And it gives me hope because he knows the issues, he knows the areas where this money should be put, and the budget is a work in progress. So I'm sure adjustments will be made, but also it's good that COVID-19 has happened. Many people have realized the need to fund the agriculture sector. We are talking about storage, we are talking about extension, we are talking about markets. These are things we've been talking about. But they are very, very important because they are affecting everyone at this moment. So if they are not given priority, we won't really go far in terms of growth, in terms of people's health, in terms of food security. There's a lot at stake, really. It's time for really the agriculture budget to be given priority.
Marilyn, this is your document. I have seen at least 3 documents. You did a pre-budget analysis when you got the budget framework paper. You did an analysis which I have looked through. I will pick a few things from there. But this is the concept note for this discussion. And you say, according to the government annual performance report for the financial year 2018-2019, agriculture remains the main thrust of Uganda's economic growth. The sector's contribution to GDP was 22% and ranked second after the services sector with 70% of the population, majority of whom are women and youth employed by agriculture. It contributed to about 80% of the total exports from coffee, fish, maize, tobacco, tea, hides and skins, cocoa beans, livestock, dairy, simsim, flowers, beans, and cotton. During the financial year 2018-2019, agriculture contributed United States dollars 3.63 billion towards total export earnings for the country. Why then, from an advocacy perspective, do we remain in lamentations? You engaged with the budget committee before,
Yes,
when they had the budget framework paper. And then you see a jump between the budget of 2019-2020 to the budget of 2020-2021 of only 0.3, from $1 trillion to 1.3 trillion. And you're asking the question, Honorable Golobi here gave us, gave us the perfect explanation. Said, don't claim that agriculture money is in other sectors. Put it to agriculture like you put, because security gobbles up quite a large chunk of the national budget. But the same roads, I've heard about security roads, the same roads transport, facilitate provision of security of the country. So why don't you affect, for example, the security budget and say, this time round, the money for security, part of it is in the road sector as well, like they say for agriculture. So how long does this back and forth and lamentation go on? Do you ask yourself that question?
That question it's a tricky one, because if you look at our engagements on the budget, we do this every year, every budget cycle.
Yeah, but the figure
But when you look at the percentages, they have never gone beyond 5% of the budget. So it's good the Honorable is here. Maybe he will answer, why is it that we are still staggering at less than 5% of the national budget? And remember, we have a commitment we made as government that at least 10% of the budget should go to agriculture, but we have never realized that. Maybe we'll realize it now that we have COVID.
We made that commitment at a continental level and repeated it.
Yes.
10 years later,
Yes,
repeated it.
Yeah, in fact, we put the target at 10%
Yes.
at the regional level. But we were hovering around 2.9% share of the budget. But as Parliament, we have not been doing nothing. In fact, if you read our interventions in every budget presented to Parliament, we have been adding resources to the agricultural sector. In fact,
Yes.
when I started being chairperson of this budget committee, the budget for agriculture was at about 380 billion shillings annually. Today, as we speak, much of the figures you see in there have been added by Parliament, to the extent that we now have 1.3 trillion. There are occasions where we provide money for breeding, we provide money for water for production, although some of those figures are to be found in the Ministry of Water, but they affect agriculture directly. There are occasions where recently we provided money for research, more resources for research. But we have been advocating. In fact, we have made statements in our reports that whereas the budget strategy highlights agriculture as the most critical sector, and they identify the interventions, we have been asking them a question, that could you match these interventions with the resources inside the budget? Because the biggest problem I've noted is that a budget is presented the way Honorable Kasaija was presenting it yesterday. You know, what he's giving you, actually, like he's talking notes. You know, so he's only touching the surface. The detail is actually in the numbers and the various interventions
In the numbers.
under the numbers. But we do not go there. For instance, in agriculture, did he ever mention anything to do with research? Did he ever mention anything to do with extension? Did he talk about markets and how much he has allocated into those areas?
Can I flip that question? In the recommendations you made,
Yes.
after scrutinizing the budget framework paper, did you mention anything to do
We
with
did.
research?
We did.
So
We
you
did. And what we did, when the estimates came, we noted that the only improvement that we saw was the enhancement of the salaries of the researchers, the scientists, because they had been left out. So what we did was to add more money on research. You know, I think we provided an additional 40 billion, I need to check, you know, on research alone, and improving research products, including things like the anti-tick bone vaccine, which they have produced through research. You know, they want to patent it and start commercializing the production of that vaccine. We provided those resources because ticks are really ravaging the sector.
Is that provision present in the...
It is present in the 1.3 trillion you are looking at. Yeah, we went to breeding under NAGRIC. We provided more resources, you know, to enhance breeding of animals. You know that our animal stock has been heavily run down for poor breeding programs in the country, or for lack of it. You know, what we need now is to import better breeds from Denmark and from other countries to improve the stock that we have here, you know, so that to enhance productivity.
I'll come back to you in a moment, because I'm intrigued that you represent a fairly rural constituency.
Yes.
Just like all of us, all Ugandans, I think 99% of us are rural, only living in this city, which is also semi-urban in a way, in a sense. You have plantations of matoke just a few kilometers outside of Kampala. So we are still largely agro-peasant in structure as a country. But when we are interacting with these things, sometimes you're wondering, who are we speaking for? What is that representation? But I have the man who does the numbers. Over the last few, during COVID, Dr. Fred Muhumuza has been transforming into a TV personality on interviewing people. Dr. Muhumuza, very nice to have you. I'm happy that you're able to beat the traffic and make it into studio.
That's the only way I could beat the lockdown. Because people were allowed to come through, so somehow that was the only way.
Yes. You did debate the budget yesterday.
Yes, sir.
You debated the budget a few days, I think the other day as well.
Before it came.
Before it came.
Before it was read.
Before it was read. And now we're doing the post. Yesterday was part of the post.
Yes.
But now I'm hoping that many Ugandans have had time to sleep over it,
Yes.
think through the numbers, listen to the minister. The MP here has just told us that what the minister presented was the surface. He's talking not. The numbers sometimes might speak a different language.
Yes.
But not many people have either the time or the brain or the head for the numbers. You are the numbers person. Help us navigate through this. And we're narrowing this discussion specifically and deliberately, as Pelham did organize, on the agriculture sector.
Sure.
1.3 trillion. I looked at the ranking. Agriculture is described in very flowery language. Its importance to this economy as a net employer of majority of Ugandans. But if you look at the allocation per sector, it is not among the top 10.
Yeah.
It's actually number 12. What does that mean?
It simply means that ranking is wrong. It's not what you should be following. Rightfully, it's not just a flowery language. The reality is this is an agricultural economy, as you've put it. Even people who come to Kampala now have seen they're just flowers. Because when COVID shook us for just a week or two, everybody ran back to the village, those who could. Actually, the opening up of transport has even allowed those who are still locked up here to run back to their villages. So it was literally agriculture, and thank God the president in his wisdom didn't lock down agriculture. The farmers continued, they are already naturally in social distancing. They farm in their crops, alone or two, mainly the women. So it's still the thrust of this economy. It's not just the backbone, it is literally the skeleton of this economy. Now the point is, how do you address it? Now the first thing with the numbers, the budget may be 45 trillion. But what is available for allocation was 36 trillion. Now if you put your 1 trillion on 36, already the number you have projected changes. The percentage will go up. Because the current percentage is based on a budget of 45 trillion. But the budget of 45 trillion involves things that are not for debate. That even before the minister begins to budget, these are already a given. So you have some good chunk of about 11 trillion, which we are really talking about as domestic refinancing, external debt repayment, domestic arrears, and then what we call appropriation in aid. Appropriation in aid is like the school fees that Makerere captures from students and spends there. It only comes here to Honorable Ugolobi to recognize it that it was there, so that he can eventually hold the university accountable. But he's not going to begin collecting fees from the universities, from National Water and Sewerage Corporation, but he recognizes that's going to be also captured. That's appropriation in aid. So the real money that is available for finance, and the 36 trillion includes 4 trillion of interest payment, which is also not for debate. So you're literally left with 32 trillion for discussion. Now that's one. The second thing, as we've said, is now you begin to go and say, how do we support agriculture? Certainly, roads for agriculture can be key. Health for agriculture can be key, because if farmers are sick, they're not going to be there. Many other things. If you don't protect the environment, agriculture will suffer. So I can as well say Ministry of Water and Environment. Now you move away from the numbers and say, what are people actually doing with the budget? If you look at the NAD's budget that is supposed to procure inputs, what inputs are being provided to the farmers and in what quantities? If you do a budget analysis, you'll find that the most unspent balances in projects are in agriculture. Then the discussion changes. Don't add more money to people who have even failed to utilize the budget that they had. So the numbers become secondary, and we begin to engage the process. So I think we have a conversation in there to say, how best do we deploy the resources to help this farmer? And we have those concerns across the whole implementation of government. That the budget is necessary, but what is the current budget doing? And it's across all sectors. I'm beginning to read in papers, I hope it is not true, and I really pray it is not true. When you hear health workers running away due to lack of PPEs, and yet the budget, Honorable Gorobi passed it, they do not have allowances paid to them. These are people handling a very complex disease. You can't pay them the allowances, you can't then buy them protection equipment. the numbers, we shelve them. Let's deal with the issues of process.
Okay, let me introduce the other panelists that I have who have managed to join us by Zoom. I have Helen Kasuja. Helen, very nice to have you. I can see you there. Helen? Helen, I can see you. Can you talk to us? I also have the Honorable Honorable Francis Gonahasa from Kibuku, Kabweri County. Honorable Gonahasa, very nice to have you.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry I've been a little delayed by technology, but I hope you hear me well now.
Thank you. And you chair the Agriculture Committee.
No.
We are making
no, I actually...
Yes?
I do not chair the Agriculture Committee.
You're a member of the Agriculture Committee.
Yep.
Okay. Yep.
But I'm also the Shadow Minister for Agriculture, so I'm very interested in the agriculture budgets because it's part of my job to do the alternative policy statements, and I'm really glad I've been invited to be part of this one.
You're an agriculturist, so I would assume that, like many Ugandans, you're also a farmer by implication and by
yes.
training. Mm.
Yep.
Yes. Now, we're trying to interrogate the allocations of the budget to the agriculture sector. It's a debate we have every time a budget is presented. Advocacy groups like Pelham keep asking the questions of whether the sector is being given the attention it deserves. I was looking at one of their papers, and they list quite a number of concerns. A number of concerns from a study they have done where the inadequacies remain. And they are scattered across, Marilyn. They're scattered across. You have staffing, extension services, inputs, research funding, financing and insurance are some of your concerns. Pest, vector and disease control that Honorable Golobi here talked about, Doctor is talking about them. And I forgot, Honorable, to introduce to you the people I have in studio here. I have your colleague from Ntenjeru, Ntenjeru County North. Ntenjeru County North, Amos Lugolobi. I have Marilyn Kabalere from Pelham, Uganda, and I have Dr. Fred Muhumuza. I also have Helen Kasuja, who's also joining us by technology, by Zoom link. So she's listening in and will be joining the discussion. Now, sitting on the Agriculture Committee and as an agriculturalist, could you just give us your impression when you had the minister present the budget yesterday in relation to the agriculture sector?
Yeah, I've been part of the Agriculture Committee for the last 3-4 years. And the challenge of under budgeting for this sector, which one of you presenters talked about as the skeleton of the economy of this country, although we keep calling it the backbone, has been a big deal. So even when they were reading this thing yesterday, first of all, we looked at the budget framework paper and the amount of money put in as the ceiling for the Agriculture Committee, the Agriculture Ministry, and we saw it as totally inadequate. You may recall that Uganda has been a signatory to what we call the Maputo Protocol over the last many years. And we also we are signatories to the Malabo Accord, all of which have been saying if agriculture in Africa is going to be useful to the people of Africa, we have to put in 10% of every annual budget. And we've been saying, yes, this is the way it should be. But you know what? We have never done it. We have never got anywhere near 8%, never anywhere near 5%. Actually, the highest we've ever been has been about 3.2% of the annual budget. Last year, we had a budget percentage of about 2.9 maybe. Now we've just gotten a little higher. So the issue of financing the agriculture ministry as the skeleton, I really like that word, as the skeleton of the economy of this country cannot be overemphasized. So I am one of the people who keep saying, yes, we sign protocols, we sign accords, but we do not have the intention to operationalize these accords. Last year, I discussed the same question. Our population is growing at I think it's at 3% per annum. And our budget for agriculture is not expanding. So if we are going to have the budget for agriculture to fit in with the needs of this country's population growth, we really have to be at a barest minimum of 6% per annum. I think that's all I can say for now. I was not happy with the budget figures, and I'm glad the minister said, yeah, I think we have to do something about this budget because of the COVID challenge. But even before we talk about the COVID challenge, we have the challenge of realism. Because many times we say, yeah, we're putting money in the road sector, and the roads are agriculture. We're putting money in the transport sector, it is agriculture. Agriculture is very specific. I wish I could see more money in the agricultural research. I wish I could see more money towards the production methods. We are still doing the hand hoe, and that, in my mind, will never change the agricultural production of this country. We are talking about agriculture, about industrialization. We are an agricultural country. If we're going to do industrialization, we should be focusing on increasing production of raw materials for our agro industries. There is no way we are going to do it with the traditional way of production, with the traditional way of disease and pest control in the agricultural sector. We need to do a lot more. Now, when you talk about the challenge of COVID, we have seen the challenge of lack of disaster food security assurance for a country. We need to do serious food security for this country, and food security is basically agriculture. How much money are we putting in agricultural food security for this country? Not only in terms of volumes of foods produced, but in terms of disease control of the foods we produce, post-harvest handling of the foods we produce. We are one of the largest countries with the biggest lakes in the world. Lake Victoria is next to us. We produce fish, but this fish gets infected with aflatoxins. It is poisonous. We cannot process it. If we process it, the big markets internationally won't buy it. Our own people may buy it and eat it, but they could be affected by cancers that come with aflatoxins. So the budget for agriculture, without raising my voice, must be taken seriously. It is, again, borrowing my friend's words, the skeleton of the economy of this country. We should actually build it accordingly.
Honorable Ganasa, I love the way you frame that. And, when you're reeling off your wish list, I was looking at you and looking at Honorable Lugolove here in studio and wondering if members of parliament who discuss the budget or engaged with the budget process from September up to its presentation and are going to engage with it post-presentation, doing appropriation and debating it. I was wondering what people like Helen, who's with us also on Zoom, and Marilyn here would be doing. I'm told we have difficulty getting a sustainable link with Helen. So, Marilyn, you're listening to the members of parliament and their central role in the budgeting process. But to be fair to the gentlemen, they're also reeling off a wish list. I wish this could happen. I wish this would happen. This is what I would want to see happen. And so where you sit, how does that change the discussion on agricultural allocation in line with the things you're doing? You point to gaps. If you could just maybe help us and highlight those gaps that you see. I know all of us are talking about those gaps in the agriculture sector that needs to be done. And place the smallholder farmer at the center of this budget and tell me, people watching us, those smallholder farmers, maybe they're in their gardens in the morning and they're now watching us, can you place them in this budget? Beyond the numbers, as Dr. Mhumza advised us, and the wish lists of the members of parliament who appropriate this budget.
What I'm seeing right now is, of course, what the members of parliament are talking about, which is not really adding up. But I would like to thank them, like what Honorable was saying. Was saying that there has been an increment. Yes, there has been an increment. It's not like how we started before. And even Honorable Gonahasa has really pushed some of our recommendations, which have been adopted. But we are still saying it is not sufficient. We still need to get more. But putting this budget at the interest of the smallholder farmers, there are some priorities that we need to focus on. Like I earlier talked about, we need infrastructure. We need good feeder roads. We need cooperatives for farmers supported. We need farmers to store in bulk and market their produce so that they can benefit from that. We need extension services. You know, farmers are there, but some of them don't see these extension services. They don't see them. So we need them recruited and facilitated to reach the smallholder farmers.
Do you see legroom in this budget as presented yesterday, where these members of parliament, when they go back to the appropriation and looking at the detail of the budget, and of course we must put that disclaimer always and have it at the back of our minds that the budget as we have it today was a normal times budget. Things have happened since, things have changed, and like the minister told us yesterday, all the ministries, I think they have called permanent secretaries for a meeting to try and realign with the reality that is COVID-19. And especially it's linked with agriculture. But I'll hold your thought there. Let me get Helen, because I think Helen now is able to link with us. Helen, are you able to hear us now?
Yes, I can hear you, Chairs.
Thank you. Have you been? I hope you've been following the discussion.
Yes.
Yes.
Partly, yes.
Okay. Let me give you a blank check to give us your general impression, given where you sit at CD and on as a technical advisor to Pelham Uganda, on the budget and in relation to agriculture, and particularly the majority of the bulk of Ugandans, 64%, the numbers float between 64% to 70% of Ugandans engaged in agriculture. In your view, how does the budget speak to them? What should it have been saying to those Ugandans and to the economy broadly?
Charles, I want to say that yesterday the Honorable Minister was very passionate when he was talking about agriculture. And he talked about the resilience of Uganda's economy, and much of it has been focused about agriculture. The president very well said that people from the villages were not calling, asking for food because they had food. So the centrality of agriculture is very critical. But when you look at the budget, like everyone has been saying, there's this notion that the budget has increased from 1 trillion to 1.3 trillion. But out of how much? We're talking about 45. So we're still hovering around 2.9%. So that does not show the commitment that follows the passion that the Honorable Minister was talking with when he was talking about agriculture. If you look at the population, like you said, the Honorable Minister also rightly said that agriculture is central because it employs about 70% of our youth, about 70% of our youth. So strategically, as a security measure, as a political measure, as an economic measure, knowing that Uganda's population is largely young people who contribute about 70% of our population, it's very critical that we invest in agriculture. Coronavirus has also brought a new rearrangement, like the minister said. The plan to decongest or rearrange or organize, for instance, transport within the urban areas. That is going to have an implication on the young people who are largely in the informal sector. And broadly speaking, the people who have been affected by coronavirus largely, the informal sector has been hit very hard. So we need to invest in agriculture to be able to receive this number of people that are going to lose jobs. So, and we can only do that by investing and investing deeply. If you look at, well, we're talking about a budget speech that did not have a budget in itself, but I'll talk about the estimates as they were given or they were planned. If you look at the investments, Honorable Gonahasa has talked about the hand hoe. We still plan to give people hoes. If you are going to deal with issues of post-handling, post-harvest handling, the minister rightly talked about the issue of storage, which is timely to be able to provide storage at community level. But if you look at the aspect of, for instance, of post-harvest handling losses, the issue is not about storage only. We need to see investments that are being put in technologies that are going to help, for instance, if they are shelling, if they are hulling, if they are cutting the cassava, we have cassava as a priority commodity. I have my reservations about the commodities, but let's take them as they are. If you look at cassava, for instance, if they are cutting the cassava, we need technologies that are going to ensure that the quality of cassava that we have, the quality of maize that we have, the quality of beans that we have, the quality of beef that we have is topmost. So if we talk about the investments that we are talking about, we need to really think about deeply that we get that political will. I like the fact that the president talked about the sanitizer sector that has grown from zero. It has grown to zero because it got political support. We need to get the political economy right. We need to get members of parliament across the divide, because agriculture has no color, to be able to speak and raise the banner for agriculture, because it makes economic sense for this country to invest in agriculture. We have a comparative advantage within the region. And I always say, whenever the rains come, even with the contraction in the economy, the minister talked about the growth within agriculture sector. And the reason being is only being that we had good weather. So it makes a lot of economic sense and business sense for this country to invest for agriculture. Even if they do it for 5 years, the yields that we are going to get are going to surpass anything that we have ever thought about.
Helen, I want to come back to studio here and start with the Honorable Lugolovi. If you look at the numbers, yes, you said at the time you started engaging with this process, we were talking about 380 billion. We've grown to 1.3 trillion. We talk about the Maputo Protocol and its successor, the Malabo Protocol. In whichever way you look at it, the gap between the aspirational 10% and the actual provision hovering between 2.9, which we have now, to about 3.2 that that Francis was talking about, is huge. The president was talking about, and the president yesterday was talking about the sectors that have grown very fast during COVID. Sanitizer, the recommendation is alcohol-based sanitizer, which makes it an agro industry in a way.
Exactly.
You're talking about the market for face masks. We are spending, I don't know, I haven't seen the actual numbers. I'm seeing these on social media. Over 70 billion to procure masks for every Ugandan. But there are those people who have been vending them on the streets. There are those people who have been producing them and selling directly to you. Government will give you one mask. When it starts, it actually distributes one to you. The other masks you're going to use, you're going to buy them off the market. But I'm wondering, did we invest in the cotton that is producing these masks? The recommendation is cloth masks. Why is it difficult to see these links and then answer the question and say, how do you close that 7% gap? Yes. What needs to be done to close that?
I think we need a restructuring of the budget as the only way forward. I was looking at the proposals that have come out through, should I call it a budget called circular, for restructuring the budget that we approved. And I could see that they have extracted resources from the budget, and a significant amount of those resources are being directed towards agriculture. But that's not enough. I think we need to begin questioning and in an open discussion, when we are all open-minded, to discuss the status quo of our budget. When you look at it, you find that security is taking a very big share of our budget. You find that works and transport is actually the lead sector in terms of allocation of our resources, over 5.8 trillion shillings. So we need to examine this and say that whereas roads are critical, but these roads facilitate other sectors, including agriculture, to operate, yes. But how are we going to repay the debts that we incur for constructing these roads? What are we going to use? It's obviously going to be agriculture as number one source, you know, because that's where the majority of our population are employed, and because the majority of our population are employed there, they pay more taxes in form of indirect taxes, etc., etc. The industries are agro-based, and so on and so forth. So we begin to rationalize these limited resources that we have. For instance, we need to say that whereas we need to do this number of roads that cost 5.8 trillion, can't we say that let's reduce the number of roads to those that are equivalent to 4 trillion, and we spare the 1.8 trillion, take it to agriculture. But we need to talk about the institutional the institutional framework that we have at the moment. You know, the capacity of our institutions in this agricultural sector to deliver. It's a very big question. You know, when I was working with the National Planning Authority, I had the opportunity to engage with the institutions under agriculture. But I could state here that among the institutions where we used to have a lot of problems responding to our questions, it was agriculture. And Dr. Mumuza has talked about how institutions return unspent balances. Agriculture is one of them. They have a number of projects where we have borrowed money that are not performing. And the problem is not for lack of funds. The loans have been, we have borrowed money, and the money is available. Parliament has approved it. It's appropriated. But the ministry, for some reason, is not able to utilize those resources. And you find that a loan is performing at only 18%.
Yes.
Why is it not performing at 80%? And in agriculture, those are institutional weaknesses.
And the minister presents your budget,
yes,
which you approve, that has a bulk of it going to debt servicing. Servicing debt of money you haven't used.
Exactly.
Yes. So
Yeah.
who gets held accountable for some of these things? Because you need to rework the architecture
Yes.
of the budget to make it meaningful for the survival of the country that the president keeps talking about. If you don't do that, if you don't get the bulk of your population who are employed in agriculture to make meaning out of their lives. I mean, we're talking about, Honorable Gonahasa was talking about the challenges, and Helen was talking about it. Post-harvest handling is what primarily leads to aflatoxins in produce. It's a loss to the farmer, it's a loss to the country, and it affects our export markets, especially both regional and international export markets. So that becomes, in my view, I don't know if Dr. Mumza would agree or disagree, that in my view would become a high priority for a country whose primary source of income for a majority of the population is agricultural produce. Wouldn't it be? So why does it remain, we talk about it, but not act on it as we ought to?
And I wanted to complete my statement actually along those lines. You know, we have a 45 trillion budget, but who is actually monitoring, you know, what is happening, the implementation of that budget? And that's where the problem lies. You know, ordinarily you would expect that the office of the Prime Minister should be supervising these ministries, should be following up what they are doing, are they actually implementing, you know? In reality, I think that is not happening the way we're expecting it to happen.
Okay. Okay.
And that's where the problem lies.
Okay. Let's come back and pick that up after a very short commercial break. So, Helen Kasuja, Honorable Francis Gonahasa, Honorable Amos Lugolobi, Dr. Fred Muhumuza, and Marilyn. Kindly hold your thoughts for now. Let's take a commercial break, and when we come back, we'll pick up this discussion and see if we can give it some direction on what needs to be done, what can be done in the circumstances. We'll be right back. You're still watching a post-budget analysis debate put together by PELAM Uganda. PELAM is Participatory Ecological Land Use Management in Uganda, and we're trying to analyze the budget as presented yesterday. I need to make one clarification. The theme for the budget that the minister presented is stimulating the economy to safeguard livelihoods, jobs, business, and industrial recovery. The other theme that I read is PELAM Uganda's theme. That's what PELAM would have wanted us to how to restructure this discussion on the budget. To say, yes, the theme for PELAM Uganda is sustainable industrialization for inclusive growth, employment, and wealth creation. That is the discussion that PELAM would envisage us to be discussing. I have a panel of discussion. My name is Charles Mwangu-Shampagi, and I have in studio, I have Dr. Fred Muhumuza. He's an economist. He doesn't need a lot of introduction. A lot of Ugandans who watch TV interact with him quite a lot because we're always in his case.
Unfortunately, I'm locked out from my farm because it's a border district.
Oh.
So I can't weed my beans.
Which one is
Hoima.
Hoima. I have Marilyn Kabalere from PELAM Uganda. I have Honorable Amos Lugolobi. He represents Ntenjeru County North. I have via video link, I have Helen Kasuja. Helen Kasuja is from CD and also an advocacy, a technical advisor to PELAM Uganda. I also have the Honorable Francis Gonahasa. Francis Gonahasa comes from Kabweri County in Kibuku District. And we are discussing agriculture in line with the budget 2020-2021. Let me come back to you, Honorable Gonahasa. You're not just a professional, but you have the passion for agriculture. And I'd put this question just before you took the break. That journey from what you talked about, from the Maputo Declaration, its successor, the Malabo Declaration, with countries on the African continent, which is a largely, and sub-Saharan Africa, largely agro-based, and sees its transformation through agriculture. I'm looking through the budget speech and what the minister was saying yesterday. There is this statement I had read. I had read earlier for the people we had in studio. I would like you, Helen, and Dr. Muhumuza to benefit from it as well. This is what the minister said. Madam Speaker, substantial progress has been made in primary production. The agriculture sector plays a central role in Uganda's economy. It accounts for 45% of exports and employs 64% of all Ugandans and 72% of all youth. That's its importance to influencing household incomes. When you interact with that statement, when you listen to the minister make that statement, and then you looked at the numbers that you had gone through from the budget framework paper, from the processing of the budget to its presentation yesterday, did you feel the two align?
Okay, one thing that comes out very clearly is that we appreciate agriculture for you. I mean, Uganda is an agricultural country, yes. Most of our people are working in the agriculture sector, that's true. But I keep thinking we are really doing the barest minimum. We are surviving. Much of our agriculture is subsistence agriculture. And the theme for this discussion is basically about, if I may quote it, with this budget as it stands, can it propel the country towards sustainable industrial, inclusive growth, employment, and wealth creation? I think we are really just, we keep saying, yeah, you know, a journey of 1,000 kilometers starts with one step. We are making very slow steps towards exploiting the great potential we have as a country. I've had a chance to travel and I've been to desert countries and I see how greatly the people out there work. So while we say, yeah, 45% of our people, no, 45% of our exports are agricultural, I am very sure we could benefit up to 80% of our export values or benefits if we worked harder. I mean, look at it. If we talked about the farmers keeping chickens, what type of farms do we have here? They're basically small farmers. When somebody has 200 chickens, they even talk about it. Out there, we should, I mean, right now, if we promoted poultry farming, which would be a very good entry point for the young people, because it's easy. You put money into the poultry farms, into the construction, into the production of the right type of pullets or chicks, in the feed production, you could export, or this country could gain even more than the 45 the minister was talking about. The 60% of our people in the agriculture sector would be encouraged to work harder and better.
Honorable Hassan, let me interrupt for a moment. We need to relink you from studio. So we'll lose you for a moment and then he'll be back quite shortly. I want to come back to Dr. Muhammad Zahir. Primary production of commodities has increased significantly. Coffee production has increased from 5.7 million 60 kilogram bags to 7 million bags between 2017 and 2019. Fish catches have grown from 391,000 metric tons to 561,000 metric tons between 2017 and 2019. This was largely as a result of the strict enforcement of fisheries regulations and addressing challenges of poor quality fingerlings and limited access to feeds. A total of 13,800 acres of sugarcane have also been established at the Attack Sugar Factory in northern Uganda, and more is planned when the Amuru project starts. The minister is talking the language that all of us are struggling with here. Does he walk the talk?
In a sense, yes, because the results are there. He's talking about increase, which means there has been some increase. Now you want to go back and say, well, this increase as a result of government action. Or was it just increase as a result of private sector initiatives linking up with the export markets and seeing the opportunities? You would pray it is both. But if it was both, it would be bigger. Now, but there is this whole thinking, before you even pin down the minister, what is the logic of the political and ideological thinking of the country's elite? You'll find people who will be saying, show me a country that has developed out of agriculture. And they are literally talking about 2020. Our forefathers did not go to America to work in ICT and put men on rockets. They went for agriculture. This slave thing that has come back. They literally were working in tobacco plantations, cotton plantations. That's where America came from. This child called Uganda cannot run before crawling and walking. Where we are right now is where the Canadians were working on the prairies of Canada. It was agriculture that thrust them to where they are today. So don't look at where Canada is today, and so I also want to do a standard gauge railway. That is Japan in the 20th century. But you are seeing where Japan was. You can leapfrog. But please first affirm where you are and then jump. And where we are right now is agriculture.
People will say, must you reinvent the wheel?
Now that's what you're saying.
Yes.
But you cannot live the other person's life. You must live your life. That baby must crawl and then walk. Cannot say because my mother and father are walking and running, I must also jump where they are. You will eventually get there. But the schedule for this baby now is to crawl and walk. But with the current technology, the baby is not going to walk barefooted like the parents did. He will have shoes. The parents had to grow up, work for themselves to buy the shoes. Now that's why the baby will begin to jump steps. So I was very happy to see in this statement that for once, everybody now recognizes agriculture was the only sector that grew positively. Industry collapsed, services collapsed, not by small margins, from 7 to 2 to 3, but agriculture was able to jump from 3.8 to 4 point something. Literally telling you, if you want to grow this economy, the sector that even can outlive COVID, like the president said, is agriculture. So if we are having a conversation on how do we resuscitate this economy, how do we stimulate this economy, glad you may be talking about industrialization. Maybe this is not the year to build industrial parks. This is the year to beef up sugarcane, which you have already shown you I can move, even with COVID. This is the time to grow up your fish, your beans, your maize. So let us focus there. And I was happy with those kinds of statements where the minister said in his last paragraph, I'm coming back with the revised budget. And as Honorable Rugorobi put it, what we are seeing circulating around is cut here, cut there, put into agriculture. We must address these agricultural issues, but now this is the time for the likes of Pelham and us, Honorable Gonahas, Honorable Rugorobi, to say now the numbers are done. Can we zoom in to go to Entebbe, to go to Naro, wherever they are, and say, what are you people doing with the money, however little or much? It's second phase of engagement. In this country, I've been engaging really in the lockdown. I got an opportunity to really take time and take stock. 80% of Ugandans are still planting seed harvested from the last season. You cannot move like that.
Recycling.
They are recycling that all season. They keep a maize cob that may be looking good physically, but it has the diseases that it picked from the other season. Yet, government is saying, I'll provide you with inputs. Now, that goes through a very complex process of procurement. How was that seed produced? So eventually, you get locked out by technicalities. Now, the World Food Program, I think FAO, designed a community seed system 50 years ago, where you must produce the seed in Tenjeru that is going to be grown in Tenjeru. Identify some farmers there, train them, who will produce not for the market to eat, but these are the reasons we are saying now. This money is going in. It should specifically go into seed multiplication, seed at that local level, so that we forget these things of the seed came late. If the seed is already being grown in the same sub-county, it cannot come late. It will be there. Supervise those, train those people, and these are the budgets we really are looking forward to. They will also cut out this thing of logistics of distribution. You are talking about the masks. We are yet to hear the truth, but we hear they cost us 79 billion. Distribution is going to cost us 3 billion. Now I wonder how much it costs us to distribute seed. If masks are going to cost us 3 billion, seed which is heavier,
through the LC system,
seed which is heavier, possibly costs us 17 billion. Now why don't I convert that into a community seed? This is the level of real of engagement to say, let's put our efforts on agriculture for COVID recovery, generate these incomes, which incomes are needed by the 68% of subsistence farmers and the others employed there who are not looking for jobs. They already have their jobs in agriculture, but they are saying, can you strengthen us? So our recovery will be faster than the UK. The UK, by the way, the economy is ranked by 20% between March and April. And they are not going to recover it. Here we are, where our people are, is growing. We have also leveled the graph. Much as it is rising, really 600. Some countries are reporting 10,000 in one day. So we are still there, but can we walk the talk, as you have said? So I am saying I'm very happy to see government change the language of standard gauge railway to talk of the meter gauge. Because the meter gauge now you are talking of that railway line that goes through Soroti, Lango, Lira, to Pakwach, Kasese, not the standard gauge which was just Malaba to Kampala. Now you are speaking to the real person down. He's going to touch that railway, produce his maize, put it on, and it goes. So I really like the language. Can we walk the talk? COVID is here. The president, thank God, he has gone into war mode. He has said, I want a war budget, not a peacetime budget.
Let me go back to Marilyn. What the walking the talk that he's talking about, if you get the railway there, you're basically speaking and addressing the farmer challenges amidst COVID-19. I want you to speak to that, to especially our members of parliament here, and say, as you go into that detail, when the minister comes back, he'll not come back to us. No. He'll go back to them. Yes. What is it? Could you, what would be the recommendations from where you stand as Pelham Uganda to say, look, this budget will make meaning to us if we see that coming back address 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 issues. What are those? What would those be? And Helen also, I need you to think about that as well.
Yeah, in terms of financing, we are talking about agroecological financing, which is mimicking nature. So for us, there are elements we look at. Diversity. We need to have more products so that people can eat and get good nutrients in the body. We are looking at efficiency. How effectively are we going to utilize the little resources we have without exploiting our natural resources? We are looking at agroecological financing is so broad. It even looks at human values. The people at household level, can they work together to ensure that at least they manage some of the produce, like what comes out from the home. We are talking about governance. You talked about monitoring the budget. Are the farmers empowered to monitor the budget and see that it benefits them? Governance. Are they participating in the policy formulation? For example, we have a number of policies that have been passed, but they are not being implemented. So is the budget, is there an allocation to the budget which is going to ensure that these policies are implemented? Because we might have them in the shelf, we have very good policies, but that could be one of the reasons as to why we are still grappling. But talking about what you're asking, there are a number of elements in agroecological financing. I could talk about recycling, I could talk about, there are a number of them. So the informal work. So if we look at the budget, if it goes, for example, research, and we are focusing specifically on research, we need to know, is there research that is targeting the indigenous knowledge of farmers so that they are supported and they are more resilient in that? Is there research for value addition? How can they improve on their products to benefit more from that? Is there research on the loss of nutrients in the soil so that they are able to produce more? So even the focus of research itself should be targeting the smallholder farmers. We are talking about bulk marketing. These farmers, they need markets, they need storage, so that they are able to market and benefit more. We are talking about extension. A farmer will need services in terms of extension. We are talking about certification and the quality of the products they produce. They need to be supported in that area so that their products meet the market. We are talking about Bubu, Buy Uganda, Build Uganda. So if these issues are not addressed, then the farmer will, at the end of it all, will not benefit. We are talking about water for agriculture production. They have small technologies that they have, but how is government supporting them to improve on those technologies so they can be able to get to access water, instead of always in the budget talking about these big irrigation schemes? But can we focus on those areas that are mainly targeting the smallholder farmers? Like I said, the policies, I think more emphasis should go to that. We have the national organic agriculture policy, which was passed last year, but would like to know, is there funding within the budget? Is there anything that is allocated so that it's implemented, so it can address some of the things I'm talking about, which are in line with agroecological financing?
Thank you. I cut Honorable Gonahasa midway. I want to come to you, and then I'll come to Helen and come to Honorable Golobi here in studio. I wanted you to go back and complete your thought, because I cut you mid-sentence to reconnect. Honorable Gonahasa. Helen, we'll come back to Honorable Gonahasa in a moment. Helen, let me come back to you. You just listened to the recommendations that Marilyn is making. I want to go back to the budget and ask, for the smallholder farmer, for the average household in this country that survives on agriculture, but actually which is the household that is responsible for the numbers, for the coffee figures that the minister was reading yesterday, because they don't come from nowhere. They come from these smallholder producers pulling together what they are able to produce. How would you have wanted this budget to speak to that farmer? And did it speak to the farmer beyond the handhold that you talked about earlier?
Yes, there is the issue of access to credits. You know, I'll still refer to the speech by His Excellency. He said manufacturers walk to UDB. Where does the smallholder farmer walk to? We have challenges of issues of credit. I know there is money that was put there, for instance, money that was is supposed to be seed capital, about 265 billion for the youth fund, women's entrepreneurship, and the Myoga, is it a Myoga, that talent fund. But we need to provide lines, specific lines that can support small and medium holder farmers. So the issue of credit did not come out for me very well. If you look at the money that was put in UDB, you have over 1 trillion. And then you have the microfinance where the bulk of these farmers go. You have about 94 billion. I think that's what the minister put there. So we want to see that these farmers, they also, by the way, even if we say that they are resilient, agriculture is resilient, they are having shocks like everyone else. We have issues of reduced remittances, and they're affecting these farmers too, because they're also being supported elsewhere. So the issue of credit is a serious issue that I did not feel was well captured within the budget speech. I would have wanted much more money to be put, for instance, in the microfinance, but also there is the issue of the policy that we have been talking about for a long time. We really need to have that policy, agriculture finance policy, put in place, and we have specific lines like, you know, we are saying private sector farms, manufacturers walk to UDB. We can say that farmer, you can walk to this particular bank and access this kind of financing. There's also the issue of insurance. We very well know that, for instance, what you saw in Kasese, you saw cows being washed away, you know, crops being washed away. I didn't hear anything about the insurance, agriculture insurance. Yet, if we are going to make sure that these farmers, that agriculture is resilient, that we are safeguarding the economy as we want to safeguard it, we must make sure that we have agriculture insurance and it's treated with, you know, it's given ample attention. So I would want to see as the technocrats are going back to reflect on the figures, these are some of the questions that we need to ask ourselves about. I also want to know that when the ministry goes back, when we all go back, we want to ask ourselves, these products that we have set ourselves to look at as a country, what is it that we are going to do? For instance, if we talk about cassava, what are we going to do? Which zones are we going to promote? Which kind of value chains are we going to promote around about cassava? We know very well that, for instance, NARO has done some research about paper bags using cassava, but where is it? If we don't fund research and its uptake and its implementation, then we are not going to be able to see the future that we really want to see. I'll not leave without talking about beef. The harmonization, the enabling environment, I talked about the policy. The harmonization of the like walking the talk, like everyone has been talking about. Talk about districts that have suffered quarantine for 3 years. Are we safeguarding livelihoods? Talk about districts like Sembabuli, 3 years, no one has sold their cow, no one has sold their goat. How are those people going to be safeguarded into this post-COVID economy? I would want the ministry, I would want Parliament to articulate some of these issues when we are making the new propositions for the budget. Then there's also the issue of community seed, like Dr. Muhumuza said. Partners like Pelam and others are promoting community seed managed systems. How can we tap into this expertise as much as POW is doing, and we ensure that seed is available when farmers need it, and it's of assured quality, not, you know, not any seed, because we are gifted by nature, anything can grow. People should be able to access quality seed, and this seed should be available. We have seen with COVID that beyond disruptions of our lives, agriculture is also affected by disruptions within the markets. You find that people cannot access markets as they would ordinarily want to access them. Whereas if seed is available within their localities, they can easily be able to tap into this seed and grow in time. So hopefully we have not lost time during this COVID lockdown, that some people have not been able to plant because they could not access seed. So I would want to see some of those things articulated within the new budget.
Oh, thank you.
We're trying to revise, yes.
Thank you, Helen. Honorable Golobe, this question was sent by someone watching us. He's called Musa Ladu. He says, kindly ask Mr. Logolobi to briefly explain how the budget relates to President Museveni's talk of import substitution and value addition.
Well, import substitution is not a new concept. It's a concept that has been there for some time in economics. It is taught in class. These professors teach their students in economics about import substitution. But the problem has always been the implementation, walking that talk. Yeah. We have not actually implemented it for a long time. We have gone somewhere, but we have not gone very far. I think this is the time now, as the President said, to seriously give it critical attention in terms of the resources we need to provide, but also in terms of the entrepreneurs themselves. Because this country, you see, this country lacks serious entrepreneurs. You have these small, informal, kind of investors. But when it comes to these large investments, or medium-scale investments, the Ugandans are not there. And this is really worrying me. I'm so worried. We really need to be there. And it's very important. Now,
what would take us there? Because if you're looking at the budget, you're asking for the Ugandan to get there. They need their government, they need their parliament, they need their budget to hold their hand and take them there. Dr. Mhumza was talking about this and saying, you're talking about this agriculture. The major players, whether small or big, are acting on their own. And you're looking through the budget and saying, wait a minute, where is that government holding the hand of this Ugandan to take them there?
That is a missing link. In fact, that was my next statement. That's the missing link. You go to the Uganda Investment Authority, responsible for promoting both local and foreign investment. And they have a department in charge of SMEs. They are doing very little in terms of hand-holding, these Ugandans to get them to those places where things happen. But we have also been talking about access to financing, which has been one of the major impediments. We are beginning to finance UDB, but this is not the first time. You recall in this budget that that was read, there was an appropriation of an additional 100 billion. Last year, I think again we provided 100 billion to UDB. I think for the last 3 or 4 years, resources have been provided to UDB. The question is how many Ugandans actually walk to UDB to look for these resources? Who you will find there are these companies like the Madivanis, the Metas, those large companies. Not a company owned by Mangusha. You will not find his company there, asking for a loan to do something. But some Ugandans are now beginning to wake up. I'll give you an example myself. I'm beginning to think, can't we add value to this fish? And I've set up something small, and I'm asking for UDB funding to help me to export smoked fish using modern technology, smoking fish. That's my intervention, small intervention in that area. I'll walk to UDB, but they will ask me so many questions. Where's your land title for this loan? That Ugandan will not have the land title. If it is there, the value of that title will not be equivalent to what they are asking for. Will not even be 50%. And these are challenges, that we experience in this value chain. They are accessing credit from these local institutions like UDB. We need to provide some form of affirmative action for our local entrepreneurs.
Because someone, Honorable Golobi, is going to ask the question. Helen talked about it. You have UDB, but the conceptualization of majority of Ugandans is that UDB is helping one, a large-scale agriculturalist, but someone who has gone to the level of processing what they produce. The ordinary farmer, until 1997-99, would have been going to the Uganda Cooperative Bank. It's no longer there. The cooperative structure as it is, yes, some money has been thrown at SACCOs, but that doesn't help lead to the transformation. So the ordinary farmer is left hanging. And I'm wondering, the small scaler that Marilyn keeps talking about, that small scaler who has a few coffee trees but would want to expand that production, the small scaler who is doing 100 to 500 to 1,000 chickens and has been struggling with their eggs on a truck where they can't find market during this COVID lockdown. The farmer who's growing bananas through Isinjiro, you can start from here, from Masaka, if Masaka still produces matoke. Masaka through the Ankole region, sub-region to the Toro sub-region. Where do they get the resources to move their banana plantation from 1 acre to 2 acres to 3 acres to 4 acres? The financing that would say the production cycle, the growth cycle of a banana is at least 1 year, it goes into full production after 1.5 years, 3 years to begin paying back effectively. Where do they go?
The assumption has been that these farmers are organized into circles. You know, that is subject to being tested. They are organized into circles. Now, circles have access to credit from the Microfinance Support Center. When you go to the Microfinance Support Center, they have been receiving resources from the budget every year. You know, in the budget we passed, they had been provided 30 billion. That is before COVID. A provision of 30 billion
had been made.
Had been made to come on top of what they already have, you know, which is supposed to be recycling. There's a proposal now in these new amendments that are coming to provide the Micro Support Center more resources. You know, what the minister read in the budget, something that I did not see in the budget, I mean, in the budget that we approved, but I think he's anticipating that he will be able to provide a 98 billion. But I think I want to agree with Helen that should be much, much more than that, because and make access much more easier. Secondly, this microfinance center is based in Kampala here. It's not known by many of our people. Many of our circles know very little about the Microfinance Support Center. And access has not been very easy. You know, they also ask very complicated questions. They want to assess the circle in terms of how much deposits are made there, how much savings, blah, blah, blah. And based on your savings, then they give you a certain percentage. You know, their intervention has also been very limited. And I don't think that in the manner they are proceeding, they will be able to support these small farmers that you're talking about. So there's still a problem. There's still I want to agree with her. There's still a big gap in that area, and we need to work very hard to make sure that we restore the likes of the cooperative bank, which we wound up.
Dr. Mhumza, I want to come back to you. Really, around the same area, you envisage the smallholder farmer. And the collective of this smallholder farmer is what contributes to the larger national basket. I talked about it earlier. You have, and the minister was talking about it, you have increased volume, but this increase in volume, yes, you distributed coffee seedlings. We're targeting 20 million bags. We had 7 million bags, 6 to 7 million bags. We are still 13 million bags away from the target with the distribution of seed.
But that was by 2020.
Yeah, but that should have been by 2020, when we should have been a middle-income economy, by the way, lower middle-income economy. I don't know how much we will be set back by COVID from that target. You're talking about vanilla production. You're talking about cocoa production in Bundibujo, Mukono, and other areas. You're talking about tea production from the Toro region through Nkole to Kabale, and the expansion that was envisaged in northern Uganda. And the question is, the interventions that government designs to deal with these farmers, beyond the talk, I want to insist on that, it doesn't have a direct relationship with this very, very low-level farmer. Those who have tried have borrowed money expensively from commercial banks and have ended up burning their fingers and slicing those pieces of land to sell them to settle the loans. How do you help them? How does the budget help them?
Yeah, I think you're really speaking to the process and the reality, and I'm glad we have transitioned there to move away from numbers to now what should the budget actually be doing. Because for me, in my planning, thinking, and ideology, is before you even talk about the money, what is it that we want to do? What will it cost us? Then you have justified the numbers. Because if I'm really cooking a meal for 20 people, that will justify what budget I'm looking for. But sometimes you just say, no, you just give me 2 million. But to do what?
Deliver the meal. So
now we are really focusing in to say, what do we need to do to get agricultural finance running? Now, it is not necessarily going to be, because we have put 1.4 trillion in the UDC, you're not addressing this farmer's need. Because UDC is not his bank. UDB. Right? UDB. Even UDC is an investor. That may not also address their concern because it's supposed to do the industrialization, where they would sell, and if that function is working in the industry, it would pay them a good price, hopefully. So UDC is also a linkage to the agricultural finance, and we need to be looking at them in that way. But what is it that we need to do? Rightfully, you have put it, cooperative bank was there for them. You need to ask, why did it die? Maybe because it was ring-fenced for farmers who had lots of risks. They went down with their bank. So you don't want to recreate that. But still, that does not take away the issue that the farmers need to be financed. Now, you cannot finance a farmer the same way you finance somebody who is buying a taxi. Because the person buying a taxi makes his money daily. He can pay monthly. Now, Honorable Gorobi here is telling you want to do his fishing. When does he get the first? Because you are financing actually the loan, the business. You are not financing Honorable Gorobi. You are financing his business. But most of our bankers have been lazy to say, give me your title. What has the title got to do with my business? You should actually structure the financing to the business. So you want to get an agricultural loan out there to say your first repayment should be coming in 4 months. So you have a grace period. We receive these things when we get loans from the World Bank, from African Development Bank. They'll say you have a grace period of 10 years when you should only be paying interest. Because they know you're going to build a dam, you're going to build a road. That road is not going to give you anything in those periods. Now, why do you come to ask a coffee farmer who is borrowing money to say, by the way, you have taken the money in January, February, you begin to pay? From what?
No, depending on the date you take the money. If you pick it in the first 10 days of January, you are paying in January.
So from what? So we need to reorient that to say, you are financing agriculture. Can we have special agricultural financing mechanisms? Now that will send the people we're talking about. And commercial banks leave them. They are following a different trade. But now Uganda Development Bank, besides receiving the money, Microfinance Support Center, besides receiving the money, they have got to go and invest in understanding the businesses they are financing, the skills of these people, the things that they are going through, and help them. Because remember, the farmer sometimes just has an idea. I think poultry works, and it's just an idea. But if they sit with you and say, do you know that you must vaccinate? Do you know the mortality rate is like this? You are the banker, you know that. Share that knowledge with them so that they can really make the right decision. I will end with the coffee thing. Why are we still pursuing coffee? Just because the colonialists told us we must do coffee. Cote d'Ivoire diverted into cocoa. In 2017, they got $3.9 billion out of cocoa. Remember, they used to be a coffee country? They transitioned. So how are we still pursuing the 20 million bags of coffee? Maybe we should now say 7 is good enough. Where is the world going? Why don't we also open up the fish, open up the cocoa, so your Bundubujo comes up? So we need to be thinking really, besides what budget have you put there? What are people going to do? And narrow, as we've said, narrow has come up. It's just not cassava. Every cassava is not just for industrial progress. There is cassava for starch. There is cassava for food. There is cassava for alcohol. And narrow has all these varieties out there. But this is an area we never invest in. You already want to give farmers cassava cuttings. What have you given them? For starch? For food? For what? This is the detail really that we must zoom in. And I'm glad the minister seems to be working in that direction, but even if he doesn't work, I'm talking about the Minister of Finance.
He's looking in the direction. We don't know if he's working there.
Now, the real Minister of Finance is the President. That one is working there. Whether the other ministers are following him is going to be another discussion.
We need to interrogate that a little more. But Honorable Gona Hassan, I want to come back to you. There's this question of to walk and speak in the spirit of the theme of the discussion. What is it that can propel the country towards sustainable industrialization? Looking at the agriculture sector, everybody describes it as highly risky. And we're talking about agricultural insurance. I don't know if that is working in this country. And I need you to broaden this one, COVID is one. If you use the example of the truck selling eggs, it's a very good example. The matoke, the bananas that we are now at farm gate in my village, if my mother is lucky to sell her bananas, she'll get 2,000 shillings a bunch or 3,000 shillings a bunch. In Kampala, you get a bunch at 10,000, and that is good for the urbanites, but it's not good for her if she'd taken a loan to invest in bananas. If you look at tomatoes, we're talking about the Malia here. What has happened to them during this COVID? Because the hotels are closed, you can't sell them to the restaurant industry.
You must sell
And
them within a day.
so what kind of insurance, and I need you to broaden that a little beyond COVID. You have floods ravaging a lot of these areas, from Kasese all the way to Butaleja.
And his home area, exactly.
And your home area. You have locusts in another corner of the country. Agriculture finance, insurance for agriculture.
Yes, you see, the trouble is that I think there's this saying that if you cannot stand the heat, then don't go in the kitchen. Now, let's talk about the tomatoes, for example. Over the last few months since COVID came in, there's been a lot of tomato production in this country, and the prices are falling. So, as it were, the farmers have benefited nothing. But I like the theme of this discussion. Can we industrialize our tomatoes beyond just cutting them and eating them as a salad or frying them in soup? Can you believe that Uganda imports tomato paste from China, for example? Why do we import tomato paste from China? It's because the Chinese process their tomatoes and increase their shelf life. Now, in the process of industrialization, we should think about our budget looking at beyond the production of these tomatoes. And I think that's the best insurance you can give the tomato farmer. The trouble again is that when we produce, we do not look at what we call a critical mass for industrialization. You get tomatoes and you get the tomato processing facilities, and there's no tomato to process. This is because we think small, we are subsistence in the way we do our things. I think the best insurance you can give the farmer is to make sure that they can eat what they can and can what they can't. This was the American principle. That's how they managed to go beyond just producing maize. They packed it, they sent it to Africa during our famines out here, and they had the market for their farmers. So for me, the best insurance you can give a farmer is ensuring that you can process what cannot be eaten and give it a longer shelf life, for example. Now, this means beyond just production. Let's talk about the bananas. There's this big thing called the Presidential Initiative on Banana Industrial Development. I don't know what happened to it. There's a big factory in Bushenyi, where I guess you come from, and your mama would be happy to sell her excess bananas. But that factory is not producing to capacity. The amount of equipment put in there, the amount of money invested in there, which could ensure that we don't even have enough bananas to process, is not being utilized appropriately. So to me, the challenge of agriculture insurance, the risks in agriculture are that we are doing nothing small, and that is it. Then you talk about the locusts. The locust is a big problem. When the locusts first came to East Africa from the Arabian Desert, the most recent thing which attacked Uganda, it was, in my mind, a challenge of organization of the East African countries. Because when I was a young man, we had what they called what do you call it? There was this thing called the Desert Locust Control Organization. All the East African countries put in their money there. And there were planes to control the flights and so on and so forth. The recent development where soldiers are walking behind masses of locusts and spraying by hand is a good idea. But I think we should go to the basics. Locusts are best attacked or are best controlled in their breeding grounds. And somebody says, yeah, you know, there's this war in Somalia, and therefore you cannot get down there, you can't control it. There's a war in Yemen. I agree. But then the bigger challenge is, what is IGAD doing, for example? I thought IGAD would be helping in making sure there's peace around the East African sub-region. You know, we keep saying, yeah, you know, I don't know whether I'm being fair to the people in IGAD or being unfair to them. I believe that there is a lot that the founding fathers of the Organization of African Unity had in mind about making sure there is peace in the sub-region or in the continent.
Okay.
Then we blame the other people. But let us do the things first.
Okay. Thank
You know, when the locusts came to Uganda, my brother, when the locusts came no, they first of all were noticed in Kenya. Now, the Kenyans were fighting them. They ended up in Uganda. Everybody was fighting alone. In unity, there is strength. And I believe the organization of
the link is not good
in the world.
The link is not good. We are losing you, Honorable Gonhasa. Let me bring this back. You see, this intrigues me a lot as we try to reconnect with both Honorable Gonhasa and Helen. There's this thing that intrigues me. How much do you expect of this farmer, Marilyn? The MP articulated that. Value add. In the circumstances, my mother in Toro, her job, her primary job, and her capacity is to improve her plantation and possibly expand it. The processing, PBD is talking about, that is government coming in. Pulping of fruit, canning of tomatoes, creating mayonnaise out of eggs, curing vanilla, and the other things require specific, deliberate incentivization and intervention. Do we see that in government? Because you can stretch the farmer, and many telefarmers, as we would call them, the elites who live in Kampala, farm by the phone, will get commercial loans to try and do what they think can work, and then they burn their fingers. So I need you, Marilyn and Honorable Lugolobi, to speak to those as we move towards the end, because we have only about 7 minutes to get out of here.
Yeah, I think for the smallholder farmers we are talking about, I don't think they are getting all that support. Because when you ask them, we had an interaction, for example, recently, when we had a sector review, and the ministry usually sends representatives to talk to some of these farmers. And it was in Amuru, Omoro district, before Gulu. And the farmer was like, where are you? I've done all this on my own. Huh? Where are you? Where we see government getting money for agriculture, but I don't get it. So the ministry was quick to say that they work through partners like Pelham, who reach smallholder farmers. So you can see that, yeah, that was the farmer putting them on the spot, like, yes, where is this budget? For me, that showed me that there are some smallholder farmers there who feel they are not supported. And I feel that the time is now that they need to be supported. We need to come up with strategies, short-term, medium, and long-term, in line with COVID-19. How do we support these farmers? Okay,
I need to make your concluding remark, because I will not come back to you after this.
I will conclude by re-emphasizing on the agroecological financing I was talking about. We need to think of ways on how these farmers can rely on themselves, like the ecosystem. How can it retain itself instead of relying on inputs which are brought to them, but being able to sustain themselves? If they have seeds, can they be supported to keep their seeds so that they can plant them the next season? Can they be supported to improve on the fertilizers they are working on, so that they, even if they are locked down in their communities, they can still survive, they can still get food? And maybe my concluding remark would be on we need to think about health and food first in this budget, as the President highlighted.
Okay. Yeah. Let me get the people linking us by Zoom to make their concluding remarks, and then I'll come to Dr. Mhumuza and Honorable Golobe. So Helen, can you come in with your concluding remark? And I'd like to background it like this, that holding the small farmer's hand, years ago, you had a cattle dip at every, not sub-county, I think, parish, yeah, at every parish, that owners of 1 cow, 2 cows, 3 cows, 5 cows brought theirs to the dip. The bigger people the honorable members of parliament, the
Pumps.
professor, maybe had a dip on their farm. Therefore, they could. The acaricides, the vaccines that were available, everything, you would expect that someone has verified that and it is up to standard. The extension services worked. You don't have those today. I thought that is the risk. The smallholder farmer in this country has vindicated themselves by putting the numbers that I have put. There is something that is missing, which should be coming from the government. What is that is missing? Helen?
Hello.
Yes, Helen. You have 30 seconds to make your concluding remark and responding to that.
Yes, what I would like to see is that, first of all, when we invest money, for instance, for extensions, we should be able, because the time is now and the conditions are very fertile for agriculture to take off, like the minister said, like the president says. So we need to make sure that whatever we invest, we monitor. Let's collect data. Let's have the statistics, for instance, on the yields. Dr. Muhumuza talked about the coffee. We know the fatalities that have happened there. So we need to make sure that we have the data on the yields, on the performance of the investments that we make. If we provide resources for the extension workers, we have to have performance measures to ensure that they reach the smallholder farmer. And lastly, like I said, it's very critical that within this period, gateways or pathways are made clear for how a smallholder farmer can be able to access credit. And also we make sure that we consider the issue of agriculture insurance. And lastly, let's promote community seed, because the future of Uganda is seed. As we're talking about sovereignty, we can't have sovereignty when we don't have seed that is managed and maintained and quality assured by our own people.
Thank you very much, Helen. Can I have Honorable Gonahasa also make your concluding remark?
Yeah, first of all, I must apologize. It has been tough using the technology. I wished I was in the house to discuss this, but again, it goes back to the old man, COVID. We must social distance. I still believe that we are taking very long, very slow steps towards actualizing the potential of agriculture in this country. There is so much that could be done. I missed out on a lot of things I should have spoken, but the time is out. The time is against us. We have talked about cocoa. Somebody was talking about coffee. Yes, 20 million bags has been the story. Cocoa, we have the potential to do that. The other thing is the fish in the seas. We have a lot of potential to do fish farming. We are not doing it. Today in this country, we're importing feeds for fish from Brazil. There are a few people doing some fish feeds in the country. We have to invest more into the training of farmers to farm fish in these freshwater lakes. We have a lot of, we have gaps in the production of quality feeds, quality fries, because in my village, I've been working with a few farmers who tell me the fry, the seed for fish does not grow. They will just eat and eat and eat and not grow. And this is what our good scientists are supplying. So beyond the production of fish fry, fish feeds, and then of course the post-harvest handling or the harvesting systems of fish, the post-harvest handling, the processing of fish after harvested, all these are very critical in making sure that this country exploits its agricultural potential. Back to the theme of this afternoon's discussion, it is only when we have good, adequate funding for research in the various value chains in this country that will be able to produce enough raw materials for the agro-based industries that I think are the real area where we have a comparative
Thank you very much.
advantage in many ways in this country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Gonahasa. Honorable Lugolobi, let me come back to you. What is the missing link? Is it policy? Is it financing? Is it political will?
Well, I think we have not got to the reality of the problem. we know all these issues. We know the constraints in agriculture. We know the agricultural value chain, you know, and how to make the value chain work. You know, we have all these good documents about it. We have all the personnel who know a lot about agriculture, but for some reason we are not moving. I think we need to realize, we need some political intervention here, you know, largely maybe from the head of state. The same way he looks at security, we want him to look at agriculture.
Thank you very much. Our time is out. Dr. Muhumuza, your last word.
It is just that the same way the president looks at security, because agriculture can actually be a security issue. And we have seen it. If Ugandans who were locked out didn't have food, you are going to have a riot on these streets. Thank God agriculture moderated their stay. So we need now to raise the bar. Let's walk the talk and not just talk.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank all the panelists. Helen Kasuja, thank you very much. Helen Kasuja from CD, thank you very much for joining us. The Honorable Francis Gonahasa, thank you very much for your contribution. Apologies also. Well, technology, the weather is not, has not been our best ally, so technology is disrupted significantly. Tells where we are in leapfrogging the economy.
Yes, we need to invest there as well.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fred Muhumuza. Thank you very much, Marilyn Kabalere. And thank you very much, the Honorable Amos Lugolobi. I'd like to thank you, all our viewers, for joining us this afternoon. And always, I'd like to thank the production crew that has delivered this show to you. From me, it's a good evening.